Stella, actually, I'll come to you first. How are you coping with everything?
Uh, well, I'm fighting for Julian's life, so every day is different. There are really difficult days, obviously. My priority is being there for Julian and trying to advance the campaign, talk as much as I can about it, inform people because they're incredibly ignorant, not willingly, just misinformed. There has been such a construction of a narrative around Julian that has nothing to do with reality. So a lot of what I do is to try to talk about Julian as he is as a person, and try to set the record straight.
Okay. And yourself and your father, John, how are you all coping?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in comparison to how Julian's doing, we're doing great. You know, we're sitting here with you, talking to people all over the world. I think what we're seeing around the world and what we're feeling from people is more and more support for Julian. Around the globe, whether it's in Australia, in the US, in England, and that really that helps you keep going against when you're fighting against this huge adversary, which is sort of the United States government, basically. That support from all these people like yourself and just people on the streets, ministers in Parliament, everyone. That sort of keeps us going, keeps us able to keep fighting. So yeah, I think we're doing good. But Julian, it's his third year in a maximum security prison outside of London. So he's been there for 3 years. He's just turned 51. It's his 4th birthday that he's spent in a maximum security prison. And he's a remand prisoner. He's not serving a sentence. He's solely there at the request of the US DOJ related to this extradition request. They oppose his bail. So that's, compared to Julian, we're doing all right.
So talk to me about how Julian is doing, because he's obviously a hero of many people, but whereas a decade ago we would see Julian in the press a lot, we see a lot of his pictures. Now we tend to see a picture. There's big time periods between when we see pictures of him and he looks like he's changed a lot. His physical appearance changes a lot. How is he doing? Obviously, I know it's tough on him, and this has affected his mental health. Is there any good things you can tell us as well? Is there any positives for him?
Well, I see.
I mean, he got married, so
yeah, we got married, and we were able to have 4 guests: Gabriel and John, Julian's dad, and my mom and my brother, and the 2 kids, so 6 in total. And that was a really nice, happy day. Julian's mood is when he sees the kids, which is about once a week, and he sees me, and he lights up. But obviously, every day is a struggle. Belmarsh Prison is the UK's harshest prison. They call it Britain's Guantanamo, and it's tough in there. He's with Category A prisoners, people who are convicted and serving sentences for very serious crimes. And so his day-to-day is very challenging. And in a prison, you don't have any control over your environment, and anything can happen. So as an example, one of the people he had developed a friendship with committed suicide. And this was in the middle of the COVID lockdown. So that was, you can just imagine for Julian, with all the pressures of facing an extradition, an outrageous case by the US, which is politically motivated. He faces a potential sentence of 175 years. And then just this kind of thing that, you can't anticipate it. And when a friend of yours takes his own life, that's really difficult to process under any circumstances. So just Julian has to deal with a lot in preparing for a case a very complex legal case. He's fighting for his life under circumstances where he's fighting with both hands tied behind his back, because that's a reality. If you're fighting a case from prison, there's just no comparison to fighting it in freedom. So, it changes depending on what's going on. The Home Secretary of the UK just a few weeks ago approved, a couple of weeks ago, gave the go-ahead for the US extradition. Now we're still appealing that in the courts. And because of the Home Secretary's profile, Priti Patel, we suspected that she would do that. But even so, it's a blow, It's even though you prepare for this kind of thing, there's a lot of anxiety attached to it, and it's a lot to process. So he's he's a fighter. He's the strongest person I know, but obviously he's deeply affected physically as well from being inside a harsh prison for over 3 years, needlessly, completely arbitrarily stuck in a prison. He's a thinker. He's an intellectual. He's a gentle person, a gentle thinker. He's not a dangerous person by any measure, and they've stuck him in this horror of a place. So, he's managing, but he's managing because he can see his family, because he can, hold his children and that kind of thing. But it's very hard.
Yeah. So as we talked beforehand about a lot of this audience that listens to my shows in America, and they probably won't have heard of Belmarsh Prison. And I will set the context. It's a prison that's quite notorious when you're growing up because it's on the news. It's mentioned on the news, usually because it houses the most serious murderers, rapists, gangsters in London. It's a notorious, harsh, tough prison. So people should be aware that they've essentially locked Julian up with the kind of worst criminals in the UK. Okay, so we've covered this on the show before, and I will encourage people to go back and listen to the previous shows. There's always new people coming to listen to my show. I think a lot of people have sympathy and empathy towards Julian and yourself, but maybe don't understand the full details of the case. Now, I don't think we should go through all of it because it has been covered before, but certainly some kind of recap of how Julian has ended up where he is now.
Well, Julian is the founder of WikiLeaks, and he is the driving force behind WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks basically grew out of a movement in the early 2000s for open government and transparency. And Julian was also against the Iraq War. And there was quite a vibrant anti-war movement around that time. And so WikiLeaks was established in 2006. There were several similar projects around the time for open government, and a lot of the freedom of information legislation came in around that time too, and in that context. And there were similar projects, but WikiLeaks' innovation was Julian's skills and knowledge about cryptography and a deep understanding of the architecture of the internet. And he understood the problem that as journalism and society moved on to the internet, journalists would have to be able to protect their sources in a different way. And Julian's a cryptographer originally, and a security expert, computer security expert. And so he applied cryptography to this problem of protecting sources. And so WikiLeaks then broke onto the scene pretty quickly, started getting a lot of attention because of the high value sources that WikiLeaks was getting in relation to China, Kenya, Peru, really big, significant publications. And WikiLeaks, there are many ways to see WikiLeaks, but you could see WikiLeaks as basically, Julian has described it as a rebel library of Alexandria. Imagine the approach of WikiLeaks is to publish, insofar as is possible, original source documents. And that means that WikiLeaks transcends journalism in the sense that WikiLeaks material has been able to be used in, for example, in legal cases, presented as evidence. Even the UK Supreme Court has used WikiLeaks cables as evidence in relation to a case relating to the Chagos Islands, and before the European Court of Human Rights in relation to a CIA rendition case, which was won partly in relation thanks to those WikiLeaks documents. So Julian is indicted in relation to 5 specific publications in 2010. These were supplied by a US Army whistleblower called Chelsea Manning. Chelsea Manning was convicted in 2013 to 35 years in prison. During this time, the US had opened an investigation in relation to WikiLeaks for these publications. They relate to the wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, US Embassy cables, Guantanamo Bay detainee camp, and in relation to a collateral murder, a video called Collateral Murder.
This is the helicopter killing of the Reuters journalists.
Yes,
Yes.
and about 12 civilians were killed, and 2 children were severely injured. And that video depicts a war crime, at least one war crime, possibly 2. So President Obama, at the end of his tenure, basically he freed Chelsea Manning the day before he left office. So Manning served 7 years. And the Obama administration also announced, their Department of Justice announced that they were not going to prosecute Julian over the Chelsea Manning leaks because Julian is a publisher, not a hacker. That was the statement by the DOJ spokesperson, whose name is Matthew Miller. The tweets are on Twitter. Anyone can check. And that the Obama administration was not willing to prosecute Julian because of the precedent that would set for the press generally. There was no way, basically, there's no way to prosecute Julian over these publications, because to do so would mean that you are setting a precedent that means that you can prosecute journalists for doing journalism. What happened? Trump administration came in, and Trump administration had a very adversarial relationship to the press, and they wanted a precedent. They wanted a case to be able to go after the press. So it wasn't that the Trump administration went and decided to indict Julian in spite of the risk that would pose to press freedom and to the First Amendment. They did it because of it, because that would enable them to do so, because the rest of the press was also in their sights. And now the Biden administration is continuing that prosecution. Why is Julian being prosecuted? It's partly because of a increasingly aggressive approach to trying to chill the press, chill openness. It's kind of a reaction to both WikiLeaks and the Snowden publications. if you think about it, back in the 2000s, the idea of an open government and transparency and so on was like mainstream buzzwords. No one talks about transparency anymore, and WikiLeaks kind of is the expression of the right to truth, to open government, to transparency at its strongest. And what we've seen is a backlash now going in the other direction, and in tandem with other restrictions on our freedom of speech. Government trying to legislate, on social media platforms, pushing against encryption, so on. It's all part of a package of an attack on our freedoms. And Julian's case is not just symbolic of this tendency; it is a wedge through which they're intending to really drive home these changes.